Ready? Ready to go up?
Yep.
Go up now. Thanks so much for joining us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I'm Joy Lim Nakrin, joined by attorney Jamara Edward Shipp this afternoon. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you for having me. Always.
Well, it's our privilege, honestly, but, we're talking about a couple big lawsuits that we're following here today. Earlier today, we brought our viewers a live press conference of the announcement of the lawsuit regarding flooding in Westside of Atlanta, and this has been filed on behalf of a dozen or so residents in the west side of Atlanta, and essentially they're claiming that the city mismanaged and did not properly care for, did not properly even design or install the water and sewage system infrastructure in the west side of the city, and it's led to homes being flooded with storm runoff, streets being flooded with storm runoff, as you can see here. But beyond that, we also heard residents describe today that they had flooding in their backyards and basements, and that they believe that the water had been mixed with sewage, not just pure, just kind of water runoff. We heard residents say that they had fallen ill because of this, because of the damage resulting, and that they had snakes and rats washed onto their property, things like that. So at least one of these plaintiffs is actually seeking $5 million in damages. It's the law office of Megan S. Jones that is representing these residents. And talking to you, we were talking about this, Jamara, off camera before we started this stream, and you said, legally, it's kind of akin to a taking of these residents' property in a way, right?
That's correct. What we have here is known as either a inverse condemnation or a continuing nuisance. It just depends on how the attorney Megan Jones, decides to do her complaint. I believe it's a courageous effort by her to, push this forward and give these citizens of some of the poorer communities in Atlanta a voice to be heard.
I want to just read some language here from this attorney, Megan S. Jones. She wrote, to be clear, FEMA has not designated this as a flood. This is not a natural disaster. This is not an act of God. This is an act of malfeasance by the city of Atlanta. And she also alleges that the neighborhoods in question are historically black, says that homeowners are being subjected to, quote, biased treatment by the city because they claim the city is addressing flooding issues in other neighborhoods, such as Buckhead, but not in their West Side neighborhood. And again, she's alleging it is malfeasance. It's not an act of God. Certainly, the city of Atlanta as a whole, West Side, like she said, it has not been designated by FEMA to be a floodplain. So, how do you figure?
So we need to take a look at the influx of individuals who have come into the city of Atlanta. There has been millions who have come into the city of Atlanta and actually increased the population of the city of Atlanta. So with that, you have to have infrastructure that is able to deal with that. And for the most part, Atlanta has worked on that in some of its more affluent neighborhoods. West Paces Ferry, Buckhead, areas of that stature have mechanisms in place to keep from having, raw sewage spill into these individuals' front yards or such. But in these poorer neighborhoods, these historically black neighborhoods, you see that there's not as much as an effort, a conscientious effort, to try to get this done. It's kind of done at a lackadaisical pace, and because of that, the residents are suffering.
And that's exactly what they've claimed, that, because of that, they are suffering. So, at this stage, what we have learned is that this attorney had filed a ante-litem notice, because we're talking about a lawsuit against the city. Can you explain what that is, and also the concept of sovereign immunity?
So to kind of give a recap to your viewers, whenever you sue the government usually has what is called sovereign immunity. In order to defeat that, there are certain things that have to be done in order for the government to drop their sovereign immunity or waive their sovereign immunity. In this particular instance, one of these things that has to be done is called an anti-litem notice, which is before I litigate, I have to let you know that I'm about to litigate. So they send out this notice. The city has so many days to respond to the notice, or say we're not going to respond, or we're going to deny your claim. And then at that point, the attorney, Ms. Jones, will be able to file suit against the city of Atlanta for the loss of use of these residents' property.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at the images that we're seeing as you've been talking, and I mean, it's sad. You see the flooding, you see the damage, you see buildings that are, covered in graffiti, and then there's flooding added to that. And how can people live like that? It really is sad. I just wonder if there are other causes of action because, some of the folks that we heard from today talked about just the emotional harm that it's caused, that, sometimes in some cases they had to evacuate with very short notice. They lost important belongings such as photographs and, I guess memorabilia, mementos, things that are important in your life, maybe, I know I have things in my life that are important, maybe something from my grandmother, that may seem trivial to someone else that monetarily you could put a value of $5 on, but it's really priceless when somebody loses that.
I believe what Attorney Jones is going to have to prove is that the city was negligent in doing this, and that this wasn't a ministerial act or just something that they just had to do that didn't have any discretion. This was something that was willfully done, and willfully they committed a malfeasance by not attending to the concerns of these citizens by keeping this water from continuing to be a nuisance to them and flooding their homes. So if she is able to do that, I believe that she'll be triumphant in her claim against the city, and hopefully for the residents, they'll be able to start to rebuild on some of those lost memories, some of those lost mementos, things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing I do have a question about, at least one of the plaintiffs is seeking $5 million in damages. Because we're talking about a city, aren't there limits on how much they could actually recover? Because ultimately it's taxpayers who are going to be paying the bill, in the damages when the city has to pay up.
So a lot of times in the state of Georgia, what they will do is they will waive sovereign immunity up until the amount that the city has liability insurance for. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you how much the liability insurance for the city of Atlanta is, but I mean, it should be much more than $5 million, considering how many employees the city has, how many buildings the city has, things of that nature. So they may not be capped at 5,000. They may be able to get more, but it just depends on what the city may have waived by buying that insurance policy.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes complete sense. I want to ask you about another major lawsuit that was filed today, and this actually is against the Racetrack gas station near the GSU campus and a couple of other entities. But it all stems from the death of a woman, Deasia Hart, who she was a mom. She had a 1-year-old child at the time that she was killed, actually at that Racetrack gas station. And attorneys for her family are claiming that the Racetrack gas station, failed to keep their customers safe. She was a customer of the gas station, that they knew of violence in the area, and they knew of issues at the gas station. They could have easily hired an off-duty Atlanta police officer or, some other security, and they failed to do so, and it resulted in the death of this young woman. Her family clearly very heartbroken. So what would that lawsuit look like in terms of claims and how it's going to proceed?
So they're probably looking at a wrongful death lawsuit due to the fact that they were negligent in hiring security for this premise. So this would be technically a premises liability case with a little bit of wrongful death sprinkled in as well. Everyone knows about that racetrack. It's a notorious racetrack. It used to be a Shell station back when I was at GSU so many moons ago, and it has always been kind of a shady place. So these people, Racetrack Incorporated, I guess, were on notice that, hey, violent acts are continuing to happen at this racetrack, and nothing, according to this lawsuit, was done to try and mitigate any of that to keep this from happening. So therefore, They are filing suits saying that, but for you guys having security, having some type of way to keep some of these violent acts from happening, this young lady would be alive with her 1-year-old daughter, which she isn't at this point. So again,
Right.
they are fully justified in bringing that suit, and hopefully they are able to be triumphant in it.
You know, this racetrack actually shut its doors just about 4 days ago after another young person, a 21-year-old, was actually shot and killed there. And like you said, it's a notorious gas station, notorious for its violence, and it's just across the street from University Commons, a GSU dorm complex. Deasia Hart was 19 years old when she was killed, and and I was one of actually 4 people shot there last October when all this happened. And the attorneys for her family have said one of their goals is really to hold big corporations responsible, because he said, Deasia was in there patronizing the business, and these are your customers who are essentially giving money to this corporation, helping them succeed, and they deserve that protection. And he said it's essentially filing a lawsuit is the only way to kind of hold these big corporations accountable, and that's kind of what the civil court system was designed for. What do you feel about that?
I feel 100% in agreement with that attorney, whoever that may be. That is, I couldn't have said it any better myself. That is how you hold these big corporations accountable. Make no mistake about it, in my opinion, I don't believe that they just had some magical change of heart or some conscious moment where they said, yeah, we're going to close this racetrack down because of another death. No, they looked at it and said, okay, this is the second death in a matter of months. We're going to get sued, and essentially that is what has happened. So that was a business decision for them to just go ahead and shut it down. And I mean, obviously it shows that the best way to deal with corporations, these multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar corporations, is to attack their pockets.
Yeah, I mean, then my question is, what happens? And this is not a legal question, so I mean, I just invite you here to solve
Right.
all the world's problems. You could do that, right?
Right.
My question then is, if that closes down, that what fills the void there? Does it leave a space for more violence, illegal activity? Because you think that having a business providing jobs and so forth is a way to help an area that might have some trouble. However, I mean, I'm not defending the corporation in any way, but that is a question that I have.
That is a great question, and it's one that's a little bit complicated. I don't know if we have enough time to go through it. See, one thing about gas stations is when you take away a gas station from an area, you still have the tanks underground, and because of the cost of the environmental rehabilitation to try and get that space to be a either livable space or a space where another business can be, then it becomes cost prohibitive to try and change this whole setup. So what we may see is that they take that little shopping area and make it into something that kind of allows it to still be a mixed use and allows them to have some type of retail area, but it may just not be a gas station where you would have people loitering around and some type of illegal events going on in that gas station. So it may just change the structure of the business, but it may not necessarily just shut completely down.
Yeah, and clearly you're very passionate about using the law to pursue justice. I want to ask you just to share with our viewers what kind of cases that you're interested in taking, and maybe they're looking for an attorney. How can they reach you?
And so I love to attack corporations by attacking insurance corporations. So I do personal injury. I also like to fight for justice, so I dabble in a little bit of criminal defense. So, hey, if you need me for either of those, reach out to me, J Shipp Law on Instagram, Jamara Shipp on Facebook, Jamara, and jshipplaw.com. Easy to find.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for your expertise and analysis. Really appreciate you joining us. And of course, we have the latest on all those stories on our website, atlantanewsfirst.com. Just want to point that out to you, and you'll be able to find all of those top stories and read about them in depth. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to download our free mobile news app and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.